The Sunset Grand Hotel stood as a testament to opulence in the heart of Manhattan. Its marble floors, gleaming chandeliers, and sweeping views of the city skyline made it the crown jewel of luxury accommodations. It wasn't just a hotel. It was a destination for the rich and powerful, a space where the world's elite gathered to escape the pressures of their own lives and indulge in their wealth and influence. Among the countless employees working tirelessly behind the scenes to maintain the hotel's pristine reputation was Clara Hayes, a young woman whose quiet presence and gentle demeanor made her a favorite among her colleagues. But unlike the glamorous guests who graced the hotel's halls, Clara's life was grounded in hardship. She worked as a waitress, serving drinks and meals to those whose lives seemed far removed from her own struggles. Her true battle lay at home, where she was the sole caregiver to her sick father. His health had steadily declined over the past few months, and the mounting medical bills were becoming increasingly difficult to manage. Clara worked long hours, trying to balance the demands of the hotel with the weight of her personal responsibilities. Despite her challenges, Clara's dedication to her work did not go unnoticed. Guests would often comment on her attentiveness, and her fellow staff members respected her for her unshakable work ethic. Yet, not everyone viewed Clara with kindness. Victoria Jennings, the hotel's manager, had always found reasons to undermine Clara. Victoria's sharp, calculating nature was focused on climbing the hotel's corporate ladder, and she viewed Clara as a threat to her own ambitions. There was a quiet resentment that simmered beneath the surface, a jealousy that Clara had no idea existed. It was during one of the hotel's most prestigious gala events that Victoria would find her opportunity to strike. As Clara moved among the guests, tending to their needs, she couldn't have known that a priceless sapphire necklace, part of the event's grand display, had been misplaced. The necklace had been left on a side table, and when Clara unknowingly brushed past it, it slipped into the folds of her apron. Victoria, seeing an opportunity to eliminate a potential rival, saw the necklace disappear and immediately accused Clara of theft. The scandal spread quickly, like wildfire, as whispers circulated throughout the hotel. Clara, who had worked so hard to build a reputation of integrity and reliability, now found herself the subject of a vicious lie. No one seemed to believe her protests of innocence. She was dismissed from her position on the spot, her face flushed with humiliation as she was escorted out of the hotel she had given so much of herself to. The hotel's esteemed reputation remained intact, but at Clara's expense. Outside the walls of the Sunset Grand Hotel, Clara's life crumbled. The accusations weighed heavily on her spirit, but it was the burden of caring for her father that broke her resolve. The medical bills continued to pile up, and Clara felt helpless. Her dreams of a better life seemed to slip farther and farther away, and the hotel, which had been a beacon of hope for her, now seemed like a distant, unattainable world. The pain of being falsely accused lingered like a shadow over Clara's every thought. She couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, the way the world seemed to turn against her in the blink of an eye. She had always prided herself on her honesty, her commitment to her job, and her dedication to her family, but now, all of that had been reduced to nothing in the eyes of her colleagues and the guests she had served so faithfully. She was no longer Clara the waitress. She was Clara the thief. The days following her dismissal were a blur. Clara spent hours at home, unable to escape the guilt and shame of the accusation. Her father, ever the silent support in her life, had no words of comfort. He could only look at her with concern in his eyes. Clara had to hide the tears from him, trying to remain strong for the man who had always been her protector. But inside, she was unraveling. The humiliation of losing her job at the Sunset Grand was compounded by the financial strain of paying for her father's medical treatments. She could no longer afford the medications he desperately needed, and with every passing day, she watched him grow weaker. But just as Clara was beginning to lose hope, the unexpected happened. One afternoon, a knock at her door pulled her from her melancholy thoughts. She wasn't expecting visitors, and her heart sank at the thought of another bill collector, or perhaps someone from the hotel wanting to add to her suffering. But when she opened the door, it wasn't anyone from her past. It was a stranger. Standing in the doorway was a tall man in a sharp suit, exuding an air of confidence and authority. His dark eyes studied Clara with an intensity that made her pause. He introduced himself as Alexander Sterling, a businessman known for his philanthropic work and influence. Clara was taken aback. Why was he here? I've heard what happened at the Sunset Grand, Alexander began, his voice calm and measured. And I don't believe it for a second. Clara blinked, confused. You don't believe what? I don't believe you stole that necklace. I believe someone is trying to frame you, and I'm here to help you prove it. Clara's heart skipped a beat. The idea that someone, anyone, would take the time to fight for her felt unreal. She had resigned herself to the idea that her life had been ruined, but this man, this stranger, was offering her a chance to clear her name. Alexander explained that he had connections to the hotel's high-ups and had been quietly investigating the incident. He presented Clara with evidence that the necklace had accidentally slipped into her apron, and after reviewing security footage, he confirmed that Clara had never stolen it. The real culprit was someone else, someone who had orchestrated the entire situation to her benefit. It was Victoria. Clara's mind raced as she absorbed this new information. For the first time in days, a spark of hope ignited within her. Perhaps things could still be set right. But the relief she felt was tempered by a nagging worry. How would she ever restore the life she had worked so hard for? How could she reclaim the dignity that had been stolen from her? Alexander seemed to read her thoughts. You're not alone in this, Clara, he reassured her. I'll make sure the truth comes out, and I'll help you rebuild what's been taken. And with that, Clara's journey to reclaim her life, and perhaps even find something more than she had ever imagined, began. The next few days were a blur for Clara. The pain of her dismissal and the weight of the accusation still hung heavily over her. But now, a tiny flicker of hope had begun to take root within her. The offer of help from Alexander Sterling was something she hadn't expected. A wealthy businessman, one of the kind of men she'd only heard about in passing, was willing to stand up for her. What did he want in return? Why her? But as she opened her door to him that afternoon, his presence was reassuring, grounding. Alexander stood tall in the doorway, his black suit pressed perfectly, and his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that suggested he wasn't just here to offer charity, he was here to fight for her. I'm here to help you clear your name, Clara, Alexander said, his voice steady and calm, betraying no sign of uncertainty. I've already taken steps to investigate the situation at the hotel. I have evidence that proves you were framed. Clara blinked, her mind struggling to grasp the reality of the situation. A part of her wanted to laugh, to dismiss the notion as some sort of cruel joke, but another part, a part she hadn't dared listen to in weeks, felt a stirring of belief. This wasn't a joke. This man, with his composed demeanor and quiet authority, genuinely believed in her innocence. How? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Alexander stepped forward, his hands slipping into the pockets of his suit jacket. I have friends at the hotel, and they've been keeping me updated. The necklace was never stolen. It was accidentally left on a table and ended up in your apron. I've also reviewed the security footage, and it's all there, Clara. We have proof. Clara's heart raced. Could it really be that simple? Could this man truly be her savior? I don't know what to say, Clara stammered, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions that had suddenly risen to the surface. Why are you doing this for me? You don't even know me. Alexander's expression softened. I know enough. And I don't do this out of pity. I do this because I believe in justice. Because you deserve to be treated with dignity, just like anyone else. No one should have their life ruined by a lie. Clara was still processing his words when Alexander continued. I've already made arrangements to confront Victoria and expose the truth. The hotel's board needs to hear about the real culprit, and they will. Clara shook her head, her thoughts muddled. But what about my job? What if no one at the hotel believes me? What if I'm too late to fix anything? Alexander's gaze remained steady. You will get your job back. I'll make sure of it. And once this is over, you'll have more than just your reputation restored. You'll have a chance to rebuild your life. In that moment, Clara realized just how much she had been hoping for someone to believe in her, someone who would see her worth beyond the mistakes of others. And here, before her, was a man who was willing to risk his own reputation to help a stranger. I don't know how to thank you, Clara said, her voice breaking with emotion. Alexander smiled, his warmth unmistakable. "No thanks necessary. Let's focus on fixing this first." The next few days were a whirlwind. Alexander took charge, reaching out to the hotel's board members, arranging meetings, and ensuring that the security footage was reviewed. Victoria, unaware of the forces that were about to be brought down on her, carried on with her manipulative ways, continuing to claim that Clara had stolen the necklace. But Alexander was methodical in his approach, collecting evidence and securing the support of key figures who could vouch for Clara's character. The confrontation with Victoria was set. It was time for the truth to come to light. The day of the confrontation arrived. Clara stood in front of a conference room inside the Sunset Grand Hotel, her palms sweating and heart racing. She was flanked by Alexander, who stood beside her, offering quiet reassurance as they waited for the board members and Victoria to arrive. Clara had never imagined that she would one day stand in this room, fighting not just for her career, but for her dignity. But here she was, and she wasn't going to back down. Alexander had made sure that every piece of evidence was in place, and she could feel the weight of it as she stood next to him, knowing that the truth would soon be revealed. Victoria entered first, her expression a perfect mask of feigned surprise as she glanced at Clara. Her eyes briefly flickered with something that could only be described as triumph, but it quickly disappeared as she assumed a more neutral demeanor. She was dressed in a sleek black dress, exuding the kind of confidence that came from years of manipulating situations to her benefit. Clara could sense the arrogance radiating from her, as if she had already won. Behind Victoria were the board members, some familiar faces and some strangers, all of them with the same air of indifference. Clara recognized a few of them as regular guests of the hotel, and she couldn't help but wonder if they had already made up their minds about her. But none of that mattered anymore. The truth was on their side. Alexander stepped forward and cleared his throat, commanding attention. "Thank you all for gathering here today. Clara Hayes, the former waitress at the Sunset Grand, has been falsely accused of theft. Today, we present evidence to exonerate her and to shed light on the real events that transpired." Victoria's eyes narrowed, and Clara could see the tension in her shoulders, the first signs of unease. She wasn't prepared for this, not even close. Alexander continued, showing the board members the security footage, clearly depicting Clara's innocent movements around the hotel and the necklace slipping into her apron. "As you can see, the necklace was never stolen. It was a simple accident. And here," he pointed to another piece of evidence, "we have the statement from the hotel staff, confirming that Clara was always reliable and honest." The board members murmured amongst themselves, some nodding in agreement. Victoria's composure began to crack as the evidence mounted against her. Clara felt a strange sense of empowerment as she watched the woman who had tried to ruin her life begin to falter. Alexander turned to Victoria, his voice unwavering. "You've been manipulating this situation to cover your own tracks. But today, your actions are exposed. Clara Hayes is innocent, and you are the one responsible for this scandal." The color drained from Victoria's face as the realization hit her. She had underestimated Alexander and Clara. The truth was out, and there was no escaping it. Clara stood tall, her heart still racing, but now with a sense of pride. She had faced the storm and emerged stronger, unbroken. The fight wasn't over, but this victory was the first step toward reclaiming her life. The days that followed Clara's exoneration were a blur of emotions. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to hope again. The weight that had hung over her, the crushing feeling of betrayal and humiliation, had been lifted by the truth. But there was still a part of her that feared the unknown. The idea of returning to the Sunset Grand Hotel, a place that had once felt like home, was daunting. The memories of being fired, the whispers, and the cold stares from the staff still haunted her. Could she truly go back and face them all, especially knowing that her return would be met with skepticism? Alexander had assured her that her reinstatement was already in the works. The board, after seeing the undeniable evidence of her innocence, had no choice but to restore her to her position. But there was more at stake now than just her job. Clara knew that regaining her reputation was going to take more than just an official decision. It would take time, hard work, and proving herself all over again. The day she returned to the hotel was surreal. The lobby, once filled with laughter and clinking glasses, now seemed cold and indifferent. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped through the grand doors, a sense of uncertainty and anticipation washing over her. She was met with mixed reactions. Some of her colleagues, including Rosa, her longtime friend and confidant, welcomed her back with open arms. Rosa hugged Clara tightly, her eyes shining with sympathy and understanding. "I knew they'd clear your name, Clara. I'm so glad you're back," she said, her voice filled with warmth. But not everyone was so welcoming. A few of the other wait staff, those who had been quick to believe the worst about Clara, gave her sideways glances, their faces tight with disdain. Clara felt their judgment like a physical weight, but she refused to let it crush her. She had learned the hard way that no one's opinion mattered more than her own. She had nothing to prove to anyone but herself. Her first shift back was a challenge. The customers were demanding, the restaurant's pace relentless, and her colleagues, while supportive in some ways, made her feel like she was under a microscope. But Clara was determined not to let the past dictate her future. She worked harder than ever, never flinching when faced with a difficult table, and always making sure that every order was perfect. She knew that earning the trust of her colleagues and the hotel's patrons wouldn't happen overnight, but she was willing to do whatever it took. Slowly but surely, Clara's reputation began to change. Her colleagues saw the same quiet strength that had always been there, the same determination that had earned her their respect in the first place. The guests, too, began to remember the thoughtful, hard-working waitress who had always made them feel welcome, not the thief they had heard about in the scandal. It wasn't easy, but day by day, Clara was rebuilding her life. Alexander visited her at the hotel, offering words of encouragement and support. He had been her steadfast ally through the ordeal, and his presence reminded her that she wasn't alone. Clara had begun to see him not just as someone who had helped her clear her name, but as someone who genuinely cared for her. Their bond, forged in the fires of adversity, was growing stronger. But Clara, still unsure of herself and her place in the world, was hesitant to let that bond evolve further. She wasn't sure if she was ready for anything beyond friendship, especially with all the chaos of her life still unfolding. But Alexander was patient. He never pressured her, never tried to rush things. He simply stood by her, offering support when she needed it most. A few weeks after Clara's return to the hotel, Alexander made an unexpected offer that would change the course of her life. They were sitting in the small cafe near the hotel, where they often met to talk about the progress of the investigation and the foundation Alexander had been planning. His eyes sparkled with excitement, a vision of hope and change clearly forming in his mind. "Clara, I've been thinking," he began, his voice serious yet filled with passion. "You've been through so much. I know that this experience has shaped you, but I also believe that it's given you a unique perspective, one that could help others. I'm starting a charity foundation, a foundation focused on helping people who are going through hardships, like you. I want you to join me." Clara blinked, taken aback by the offer. "A charity?" she repeated. "But I'm just a waitress. I don't have any qualifications to run a charity." Alexander chuckled softly, shaking his head. "That's not what I mean. You have something far more valuable than any qualification on paper. You have a heart that's strong and resilient. You've been through hell, and you're still standing. That's the kind of strength we need. Your story will inspire others, Clara. You can help others who are struggling to find their way, just as you found yours." Clara felt her breath catch in her throat. It wasn't just the offer that moved her, but the way Alexander saw her. He didn't see her as the waitress who had been fired unjustly. He saw her as a woman who had fought for her dignity, a woman who had survived against all odds. It was a perspective Clara hadn't allowed herself to fully embrace. The thought of being a part of something so meaningful, of making a difference in the lives of others, felt like a dream come true. "But I don't know where to start," Clara said, her voice full of uncertainty. "What can I possibly do to help people?" Alexander smiled, his eyes warm and filled with encouragement. "That's the beauty of it, Clara. We're going to build it together. I've already begun planning the foundation's goals, job training programs, financial literacy workshops, assistance for people going through tough times. You'll be part of everything, from the planning to the execution. We'll make it a success, and we'll do it together." Clara's heart swelled with emotion. She had spent so much time thinking about how to survive, how to make ends meet, that she hadn't considered the possibility of truly helping others. This was her chance to make a real difference, to be part of something greater than herself. I'd love to," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll do it. I want to help people, Alexander. I want to give back." And so, Clara became an integral part of the foundation. She worked alongside Alexander, helping to plan and organize events, reaching out to potential sponsors, and connecting with people whose lives had been touched by hardship. The work was challenging, but it was also rewarding. And with every success, Clara grew more confident. She began to believe that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. As the foundation began to take shape, Clara found herself not only changing lives, but also changing her own. The weight of her past, of the wrongful accusations, the shame, the guilt, began to lift. With every new program, every life that was impacted by the foundation's work, Clara felt a sense of purpose that she had never known before. But amidst the hard work and dedication, Clara couldn't ignore the growing connection between her and Alexander. The way he looked at her, the way he believed in her when no one else had, stirred something deep inside her. She had always been cautious with love, afraid of being hurt, but with Alexander, there was something different. He had been there for her when she needed him most, and now, as they worked side by side to build the foundation, Clara couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something more than just a partnership. But for now, she focused on the work, knowing that the path she was walking, both professionally and personally, was leading her to something beautiful. As weeks turned into months, Clara's life began to take on a new rhythm, one that revolved around the work she was doing with Alexander and the foundation they were building together. The charity's goals were ambitious, but they were driven by a shared sense of purpose that made every late night, every phone call, and every exhausting meeting feel worthwhile. Clara's role was pivotal in this mission. She wasn't just helping to coordinate events or organize workshops. She was the heart and soul of the foundation, the embodiment of its mission to empower those who had been knocked down by life's unfairness. Together, she and Alexander worked tirelessly to make the foundation a success. They met with potential donors, negotiated sponsorships, and designed programs that would offer real, tangible help to those who needed it most. Clara quickly found herself immersed in the work, and the more she contributed, the more her confidence grew. She had always been good at connecting with people, at making them feel seen and valued, and now she was able to use those skills to make a real difference. But it wasn't just the work that was changing Clara. It was the bond she was building with Alexander. What had started as a partnership rooted in mutual respect and a shared desire to right a wrong had evolved into something deeper, more intimate. Their late-night meetings were often punctuated by quiet moments of understanding, when words weren't needed to convey the respect and admiration they felt for one another. Clara couldn't deny the growing connection between them. Every time their eyes met, there was a spark, an unspoken promise that something more was beginning to bloom. But Clara, ever cautious, hesitated to acknowledge it. She had been hurt before, and the idea of letting someone into her heart again was terrifying. She wasn't sure if she was ready to risk the vulnerability that love demanded. But Alexander never pushed her. He respected her space, never forcing the issue, but always there when she needed him. He believed in her, in the strength that had gotten her through the toughest times of her life. And as the foundation grew, so too did their relationship. There were moments, small, fleeting moments, when Clara allowed herself to imagine a future with him. She saw how he cared for her, how he was always by her side, no matter the obstacles they faced. His faith in her, in the foundation, and in their shared mission was unwavering. Despite her growing feelings for him, Clara remained focused on the task at hand. The first large event to raise funds for the foundation was approaching, and the pressure was mounting. It was to be a gala, a glamorous evening that would attract some of the most influential people in the city. The event was a crucial milestone for the foundation, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Clara was in charge of overseeing the event's preparations. Every detail had to be perfect, from the venue to the catering, to the guest list. It was an overwhelming task, And as the day of the gala drew closer, the pressure began to take its toll. She found herself working longer hours, sacrificing sleep and meals to ensure everything was in place. But even as exhaustion set in, Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the work they were doing. Alexander was there every step of the way, offering guidance and support. He never once made her feel like she was in this alone. His belief in her abilities, was the fuel that kept her going. And then, as the gala day finally arrived, Clara stood in front of the grand ballroom, watching as the first guests began to arrive. The decorations were breathtaking, the ambience elegant, and the guests were filing in, dressed in their finest attire. The event was unfolding exactly as she had envisioned it, flawlessly. Alexander appeared by her side, his presence comforting amidst the chaos of final preparations. He wore a black tuxedo that made him appear even more commanding, yet his eyes softened as they met hers. "You've done an incredible job, Clara," he said, his voice low and sincere. She smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "I couldn't have done it without you." He tilted his head, a faint smile on his lips. "You've done more than your fair share. This is your moment too." The evening was a resounding success. Guests mingled, donations poured in, and the programs they had worked so hard to establish began to take root in ways that exceeded even their expectations. The gala was not just a fundraiser. It was a celebration of the lives they had touched and the lives they would continue to change. And in that moment, as Clara watched Alexander interact with the guests, her heart swelled with something she hadn't expected to feel: love. It was the kind of quiet, steady love that grew over time, built on respect, shared values, and a deep, unspoken connection. Clara realized that she had already fallen for him. She just hadn't known it yet. The night of the gala was a turning point for both Clara and Alexander. The success of the event was undeniable. The foundation had raised an impressive sum, and the guests were more than generous. Clara couldn't stop smiling as she watched the night unfold. It wasn't just the financial success that mattered. It was the hope that they had created, the lives they had touched. It was the beginning of something bigger than either of them could have imagined. As the evening drew to a close, Alexander took Clara's hand, guiding her to a quiet corner of the ballroom. They stood there for a moment, watching the guests dance and celebrate, the sound of laughter and music filling the air. The room was filled with a sense of triumph, of dreams coming true. "You did it," Alexander said, his voice filled with admiration. "You turned this idea into a reality. I couldn't be prouder of you." Clara turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had worked so hard for this moment, and now that it was here, she realized it wasn't just the success of the foundation that mattered. It was the way she felt when she was with him, the way he made her feel like she was capable of anything, the way he had never wavered in his belief in her. "I couldn't have done it without you," Clara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You've believed in me from the very beginning, and I don't know where I'd be without you." Alexander's eyes softened, and he stepped closer to her, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "You'd be exactly where you belong, and that's here, with me." In that moment, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. The noise of the party, the clinking of glasses, the hustle and bustle of the night. All of it disappeared as Clara and Alexander stood there, their hearts beating in sync. There was no more hesitation, no more fear. Clara knew, with a certainty she had never felt before, that this was right. Without a word, Alexander leaned in and kissed her. It was slow and tender, a kiss that spoke of everything they had been through together and everything that was yet to come. Clara melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, her heart soaring. In that kiss, she found not just love, but a sense of belonging, a sense of peace she had never known. As the kiss deepened, Clara realized that this was only the beginning. Together, she and Alexander had already changed lives through the foundation. Now, they were embarking on a new journey, one that would be just as transformative, not just for others, but for themselves as well. The future was no longer a place of fear and uncertainty. With Alexander by her side, Clara knew she could face whatever came next with confidence, with love, and with hope. As the weeks rolled by, the foundation continued to grow and flourish, thanks to Clara's unwavering dedication and Alexander's strategic genius. They had created a system that provided not only financial support to those in need, but also mentorship, job training, and opportunities for personal growth. It wasn't just about giving people money. It was about empowering them to build better lives for themselves, to break free from the cycles of hardship they had been trapped in for so long. Clara found herself more deeply invested in the work than she had ever anticipated. She was meeting with individuals who had struggled all their lives, but who now had a chance at a brighter future. There was Sandra, a single mother who had been forced to take multiple low-paying jobs just to keep food on the table. Thanks to the foundation, she had gained the skills necessary to start her own business. Then there was Malik, a young man who had been incarcerated but was now receiving guidance and support to reintegrate into society. Each success, no matter how small, felt like a personal victory for Clara. But as fulfilling as the work was, it wasn't without its challenges. Clara often found herself balancing the demands of the foundation with her growing relationship with Alexander. Their connection had deepened over the past months, but they both knew that their professional and personal lives were intertwining in ways that required constant attention and care. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of meetings, Clara and Alexander found themselves alone in his office at the foundation. The city skyline stretched out before them, the lights twinkling like 1,000 stars in the night sky. Clara leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes tiredly. "You look exhausted," Alexander said, his voice filled with concern. "We can take a break if you need it." Clara smiled, appreciating his understanding. "I'm just overwhelmed. It's been so rewarding to see everything come together, but sometimes it feels like it's never enough. There's always more to do, more people to help, more lives to change." Alexander sat across from her, his expression softening. "You've already done so much, Clara. You've given these people more than just a chance. You've given them hope. And that's something not many people can do. You should be proud of yourself." Clara met his gaze, her heart swelling with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've been my rock throughout this entire journey. Your belief in me, in us, it's what's kept me going." Alexander's eyes darkened with something that went beyond admiration. He stood up and moved toward her, his presence commanding and intense. "Clara, I need you to know something," he said softly, his hand reaching out to gently touch her arm. "This foundation, this work, it's important. But what we've built together, it's more than just business. It's about us. And what we have, it's something I've never felt before." Clara's breath caught in her throat, the weight of his words sinking in. She had felt the same pull toward him, the same undeniable connection that had grown stronger with every passing day. She had fought it, unsure of her ability to balance love and work. But now, standing in front of him, all her fears seemed to dissipate. "I feel it too," Clara whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you." Without another word, Alexander pulled her into his arms, enveloping her in the warmth of his embrace. The world outside seemed to fade away as they held each other, the weight of their shared journey, of everything they had accomplished together, finally sinking in. In that moment, Clara realized that this partnership, both professional and personal, was the foundation she had been searching for all her life. They stood there for a long while, savoring the quiet comfort of each other's presence. Clara had never imagined that her life could change so dramatically, that one chance encounter, one act of kindness, could lead her to a future she had never dared to dream of. But now, with Alexander by her side, she knew that anything was possible. The foundation was thriving, its programs expanding to more cities, its impact reaching further than Clara and Alexander had ever imagined. But as successful as the work was, it was their personal lives that had blossomed in ways neither of them had anticipated. Their relationship had evolved from a professional partnership into something much more profound, something rooted in mutual respect, admiration, and, above all, love. Clara had learned to trust again. She had opened her heart to Alexander, allowing herself to believe that love wasn't something to fear, but something to embrace. In return, Alexander had shown her that love wasn't just about grand gestures. It was about the small, everyday acts of kindness, the quiet moments of support, and the unwavering belief in each other's potential. Their bond was unshakable, and it was clear to everyone who knew them that they were meant to be together. But their journey wasn't over yet. There were still so many lives to change, so much work to be done, and as the foundation grew, so too did their commitment to each other and to the people they were helping. One sunny afternoon, as Clara and Alexander walked through the foundation's new office, discussing plans for an upcoming outreach program, Alexander stopped in front of the window, gazing out at the city below. He turned to Clara, his eyes filled with purpose. "There's so much more we can do, Clara," he said, his voice steady and sure. "We've come a long way, but we're just getting started. I want us to take this even further, to build something that will last, something that will make a difference for generations to come." Clara nodded, her heart swelling with pride and excitement. She had never felt more certain of her place in the world. "I'm with you, Alexander. I'll always be with you." And in that moment, with the promise of the future ahead of them, Clara knew that no matter what challenges they would face them together. The foundation was more than just a charity, it was their legacy. And as long as they were by each other's side, they knew that anything was possible. The work would never be easy, but it would always be worth it. And together, Clara and Alexander would continue to change lives, one person at a time, building a future that was brighter, better, and full of hope. With Alexander's love and her newfound strength, Clara had found her purpose. She had found a family, a life, and a future she had once only dreamed of. And as they stepped into the future together, they knew that this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. As the years passed, the foundation flourished beyond anyone's expectations, reaching people in need across the globe. Clara and Alexander, now partners in both business and life, had not only transformed countless lives but also built a life for themselves, one filled with purpose, love, and fulfillment. Their journey had been one of struggle, of overcoming obstacles, but it had also been a journey of hope, resilience, and growth. From the darkest moments of Clara's life, where she had felt alone and defeated, to the bright, new future she had built with Alexander by her side, the story was a testament to the power of second chances and the strength of the human spirit. They had come from different worlds, yet together, they had found a common purpose that bound them in a way nothing else ever could. Their love was not just about passion. It was built on a foundation of trust, respect, and mutual support, and that foundation was stronger than anything life could throw their way. Looking back on all they had accomplished, Clara knew that the challenges had been worth it. She had found not only success and happiness but a partner who believed in her, who had seen the best in her when she couldn't see it in herself. And as they stood side by side, looking out at the future they were still building, Clara realized that this was only the beginning. They had created something beautiful together, something that would continue to impact lives for years to come. The love they shared and the work they had done was their legacy, one that would live on long after they were gone. Together, they had changed the world, and in doing so, they had changed themselves. Their journey was far from over. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story and for being part of this incredible journey. Your support means the world, and we're so glad you could experience this adventure with us. If you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your feedback helps us create more content that we hope you'll love. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We've got plenty more stories coming your way. Once again, thank you for being here. We look forward to sharing more stories with you soon.